All right, hello everyone. Hi there. So I am getting set up. You can see my cat Colby right back there. So today we're going to be talking about the JavaFX scene builder. We're also going to talk about how to switch scenes in JavaFX. This will prepare you for homework 5. So we're going to talk about FXML as well as how to use that with something called a controller class. Just some updates here, and actually, this fell off the bottom. Let me see if I can. There we go. Um, so homework 4 is due this Friday. I did push the deadline back. However, it won't be graded in time for the exam. Homework 3 will be. Homework 4 won't be because the exam is next Tuesday. We'll talk a bit about the exam too here in a second. But to that end, because I will be releasing a solution, I cannot allow people to submit homework 4 later than when the solution is submitted, which is going to be released on Saturday. That is to enable people to study. So if you're not done, submit whatever you have by Friday night. And that is, of course, Eastern time for those who are international or in different time zones. Any questions regarding homework 4? And again, just ask questions in the chat. Um, Homework 5 is posted. I posted it today, so I'll go ahead and just pull it up real quick onto the screen here. So I just posted homework 5 today. You're going to be doing 5x5 tic-tac-toe, and as I said before, I'm going to insist that there are pairs. I am going to allow people to work in triples, but the assignment has additional uh, features that need to be added if you're working in a group of 3. So, for example, in addition to with 5x5 tic-tac-toe, you're not looking for 5 in a row. You're actually looking for 4 in a row. Um, and so the additional features that we're going to add include adding a score mode, which is described here. In addition, you will have to implement a computer opponent, but that doesn't need to be sophisticated. You don't need to worry about building some very strong AI model. I'm not expecting that. Even if it's a random opponent, it's acceptable. That said, you're welcome to challenge yourselves to build a more advanced one. The main feature of the assignment is GUI. You're going to build this in a GUI. It may look something like we have in the picture here. We'll talk about how to build more advanced GUIs today with the scene builder. You also need to use Git, and this actually would have been pretty much necessary anyway, given that now we're not all physically on grounds together, and we should not be. Given that you need to use Git to distribute files among the team. The way you will submit this assignment is you will not submit your source code. You will submit a Git link, and you will invite. So you're going to set this up as a private Git repository. It does need to be private. Um, don't make it public because you have classmates, and that is a way for them to be able to try to steal your code, and that would violate our copying policy, but both parties would be responsible. So make your GitHub private, at which point your TA will need to be invited to your GitHub at the submission deadline, and we'll post how to do that, who or which TA to invite later on, and that's how they will grade it. Apologies for the pings there. So that's homework 5. It's going to be due April 8th, so you have 2 weeks from tomorrow to do it. And generally, the idea here is all of these spaces in the grid are going to be buttons that you click on that have an action listener that actually produces the results of the game. You guys are quiet today. Any questions about anything I've talked about so far before I get into the exam stuff? I'll give a minute for people to type. I'm not okay. I'm not. Oh wait, do I have a delay on? Settings. No, I don't have a delay on. Okay. When is the exam? So just to show you where it is, if you go on Colab, and I'll uh, switch here. If you go on Colab to the course schedule, you will see that the schedule has been updated. Shy, I'll answer that question in a second. And you'll see that we have the exam review on Thursday and the exam on Tuesday. And I will talk about the exam here in a second. So any questions about the exam, just hold off on those for now. So for homework 5, you have to enable both a 2-player mode and a 1-player mode. So you're going to have 2 scenes. And we've talked about scenes before. We'll talk about how to switch scenes later today. You're going to have a start screen that displays the title of the game. It says going to allow the player to pick either a 1-player game or a 2-player game. Could we make a theme tic-tac-toe? Absolutely. I made this assignment bare bones, and you're welcome to do a bare bones interpretation. You are also welcome to add as much complexity and theme as you would like. However, it needs to have the core implementation details. You can add to the requirements, you just cannot take away from the requirements. But in the 2-player mode, what will happen is, notice it says current turn X, so the X player will then click a button. And you can think of this as, it's not like online multiplayer, of course, nothing like that. This is just hot seat multiplayer. Basically, you take turns who has control of the mouse. With the computer opponent, you're going to, so the player will be X, the computer opponent will be O. And then every time the player makes a move, the computer will automatically respond, and then it's the player's turn again. So and this is all outlined in the write-up. I'm not going to read over the whole thing here. I just wanted to introduce the assignment. All right, so the exam. So first, I want to lay out what challenges that I have before I tell you the format of how we're going to do the exam. So the most obvious challenge that I have to deal with is I'm not going to be watching you take the exam. Another slightly less obvious challenge is that there are people in different time zones who cannot necessarily take the exam 12:30 to 1:45 on the day of the exam. So to that end, here's what you can expect on the exam. First, there will be a 24-hour window to take the exam, but as soon as you open the exam, you have a 1 hour, or depending on the length of the exam, 1.5 hour. I haven't actually written it yet. Anywhere from 1 to 1.5 hours to take the exam. Once you open it, that timer starts. You have to open it sometime in that 24-hour period. So you'll have to take it the same day as everyone else, but you won't be taking it necessarily at the same time. Now, to that end, and this is where I have to be a little bit, I don't like framing it this way, but if I find reasons to believe that someone cheated on the exam, and we'll talk about what I define as cheating in a second, but after I talk about what's allowed, if I find that someone cheated on the exam, then that person will automatically fail the course, and that will be no credit if you're doing the credit, no credit option. Now, what is allowed? So first and foremost, the exam is open note, open compiler, and open internet. And the reason it's open on all 3 of those things is because any attempt for me to try to stop it would only hurt honest students. So I'm not going to do that. But what that means is you can expect the exam to be more open-ended. You can expect the exam to require writing code. And you're welcome to use your compiler to help you, and then to copy and paste that code into Colab. So be aware that that is allowed. Open note, open, I mean, we don't have a textbook. Otherwise, I would say open textbook. Open note, open internet, open compile, or open IDE. However you want to use it. The resources you are not allowed to use, and this is key. You are not allowed to use other students for any reason. You're not allowed to email them, not allowed to ask them, nothing. Second, because of the fact that this exam is asynchronous, I'm going to probably at some point have a question that maybe is a little ambiguous. And I apologize in advance. I will do everything I can to not have that, but I want to state that that's a possibility. I am not going to be awake for 24 hours straight responding to emails about confusing questions on the exam. So because of this, I have to immediately say up front, if something is ambiguous on the exam, in the answer, write, I think this is ambiguous because blank, and state what assumption you make to answer the question. I can't answer questions because I can't have it where I'm answering questions for students who take it after 1 p.m., but students who take it before are just SOL. So to that end, I can't answer questions over email about confusion on the exam. If something confuses you, just write it on the exam. And I'll take that into account when grading. So my goal here, and I want to be clear, the exam will be more open-ended. There will be more coding than the first exam because of these changes. Because I do have to reasonably try to interpret what skills you have. But I have to be also at the same time just fully cognizant of the fact that this semester is extraordinarily unusual. May nothing like this ever happen again for the rest of my career. If that were the case, I'd be very happy. And so to that end, I am not trying to like take that out on you. I'm just having to define the exam a bit differently because of the fact that I'm not going to restrict notes and things like that. So there'll be more. Thursday, we're going to do an exam. I'm going to create a Piazza thread later today, and you can start dropping in exam prep questions there. That way I have some questions to work with rather than just waiting on Twitch chat. Any questions about the exam procedure and how we're going to do it? Is a C minus passing your class or C? A C minus will be passing. So 70% and above. And certainly you can opt to receive your letter grade. I will do everything I can to let you know what your letter grade is by the deadline, which is to say all homeworks will be graded. Realistically, homework 5 will be graded by then. Homework 6 is a bit iffy. Certainly homework 7 will not be graded by then because it's due that day. But I will try to have all the quizzes graded by then, etc. And I apologize, I still don't have quiz 5 fully graded. I did fix the one question that was asked about on Piazza, but I haven't fully graded it yet, and it's just because everything that has been going on. As you can see, I have a different background now, so I've moved. Any other questions? Okay. With that, and if I see questions, I'll stop myself and proceed. With that, we're going to jump back into JavaFX today. Now, I don't suspect that I'll end up taking up the full hour 15, although I'm already 15 minutes in. I don't suspect the rest of this will take an hour. So if we finish a bit early today, certainly I can answer any more questions about the homework, homework 4 or 5, about the exam, about course policies, etc. But to that end, first, I just want to quickly give, and this is just a very bare bones way to show how to switch scenes. So, as we talked about before, the idea is at your base level, and actually, I'm going to do this real quick. At your base level, as you can see, I've put a whiteboard up. You have your window at the bottom of this hierarchy, and this is your stage. And on the stage at any one time is a scene. And that scene contains a pane, and this pane can contain either additional panes or widgets. And the thing is, we may find, and by the way, please let me know if you can't see this. I know there's a bit of glare up there, and I can't really fix that. But please let me know if you can't see this. Now, one thing that we'll have often with an application, and you've probably seen this in applications before, is you'll actually have more than one scene. That is, this might be your startup screen, just hypothetically, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, homework 5. This might be your startup screen scene, and then over here you might have your gameplay scene. Now, the thing is, only one scene can be on the stage at a time. This makes sense. If you think of a play, you're not going to want two different scenes being acted out at the same time. You're going to want one scene at a time. So to that end, we want to be able to switch the scenes. And it turns out that this is actually a lot simpler than you may think it is. So the way that we're going to switch scenes is first, let's just say, I set up, and I just built this off my previous code examples, which again, all my code examples from last Friday are up. I know it was a weird time for the lecture, so a lot of people may have missed it. You can go back and look at those and look at the video, etc. All the way, everything I do today is going to be up, so you can see that too. From here, I create S1 text and S1 button. These are my scene 1 widgets. I also create S2 text and S2 button. These are my scene 2 widgets. And I defined scene 1 as a flow pane. I defined scene 2 as a grid pane. We'll talk about the difference between these in a bit. And the idea is I add S1 text, S1 button to S1 root. That's my scene 1 pane. That is the root pane of my scene. And then the root pane of scene 2 is S2 grid. And I'm going to add the buttons, and notice that there are these extra arguments here. This allows you to define where in the grid you add particular widgets, and we'll talk about why you would want to do this later. I then define my two scenes, so I go ahead and construct them. S1 is new scene, S2 is new scene, and then I set up my action listener. So first, it's worth remembering that stage.setScene, this is the function that says which scene is currently active. All I need to do with my action listers, remember this is a Lambda body that is creating an anonymous action event, an event handler, which takes in action event E and it performs a particular task. Specifically, I'm going to say that the S1 button is going to change to scene 2. This changes to scene 2. And S2 button changes to scene 1. Are we allowed to use this code in our homework assignment? I fully expect you will. So this is a great question. In UIs, I'm not expecting you to memorize all the syntax. There will be some amount of syntax that we'll discuss that I expect you to know for the exam. Like, nothing here is overly complicated to me, except for maybe the grid pane stuff. But buttons and labels, I would expect you to know for the exam. But as for the homework, yeah, I absolutely expect that you will use some of this code and repurpose it. And in fact, that's a very normal thing to do. I discourage that in intro programming classes because oftentimes students will take code they don't understand and try to use it, and then they don't know why their code works, or worse, they don't know why it doesn't work. But in this case, my expectation is I've been teaching this now. This is my second day. I don't necessarily expect you to always memorize the syntax, but if you can see how I'm doing this and you can repurpose that for your own code, that's perfect. That's what programmers do a lot of the time. So at this level of programming class, yes, I'm absolutely fine with you re-engineering code that I've written for class. All right. So from there, pardon me, we're going to set up my run configurations. So I'm just going to run this as an application. Call this scene changer. And then remember that we need those VM options. So I actually have those written down in another window. Give me 1 second. Here they are. And for now, we're going to ignore this one. We'll get to this particular argument later today. We're going to paste this VM argument. From there, we need to actually replace this with our path, which for me is in my downloads folder here, my lib folder. So this is my path. And there we go. So remember that we always have to set up our VM arguments in JavaFX. Apply. Okay. Then, oops, sorry, forgot to say what the main class was. That's important too. Scene changer. Apply. And now we're going to run this. And you'll see that I have this is scene 1, go to scene 2. Notice that scene 2 is a larger window. Scene 1, 300 by 200. Scene 2, 500 by 500. And I can go back to scene 1. And that's all you need to do. So it's fairly simple to change scenes. You just say stage, set scene, and the new scene. So now, at this level, stages are fairly simple. You just build the scene, you attach the scene to the stage, and there you go. And the panes and widgets we've looked at are fairly simple. Button doesn't have too many features. You know, we have the set action listener, we have the text. We've shown a couple of different features with it. Labels, of course, are very simple. We've also looked at text areas and things. But panes can be, or scenes, excuse me, may seem a bit difficult. For example, how do you build a scene to look nice? Currently, the tools we're using, trying to just hard code what the scene looks like, are actually fairly limited and not particularly helpful. So instead, let's use a tool that's available to us. And for this, I'm going to create a new, but this is where it's different, fxml file. This is for JavaFX markup language. We're going to do an fxxml file, and I'm going to call this in class demo. And now at first, you may think, oh no, this is text, but that's where this scene builder is going to come in handy. And this scene builder will allow you to build a scene from a GUI context. So for example, I could have a border pane put in, excuse me. One thing you should know about Scene Builder in advance, it crashes a lot. So this is our anchor pane. It's our starting point. From there, we can click and drag a border pane into it. We can then hopefully resize this. I don't know why it's not letting me resize it. This worked in, there we go, fit to parent. So what I did there was I clicked and dragged border pane down here. And then in my border pane, I can add things like controls, like a button. This border pane I'm having issues with. Apologies there. Oh wait, no, I confused border pane and box pane. Sorry, let's start over. Let's just go ahead. Let's pretend none of the last 5 minutes have happened. Apologies there. I confused two different things. So a new fxml file in class demo. See, nothing happened. We're right back. We then click on Scene Builder. And then from there, we can select our containers. And I can resize this just to get a bit more work. And I can choose any different types of panes. For example, I can do a flow pane, which we've looked at before, or I can do something like a grid pane. Give me 1 second. I'm having... There we go. So something... Sorry, I shouldn't have had an anchor pane there in the beginning. So something like a grid pane. And then from there, I can specify how large I want my grid to be. Over here, you can turn on grid lines visible, for example. The alignment, so if I were to add, say, go to controls and add, say, something like a button over here, notice that currently it's aligning to the left. I can try to sorry, this I will say that I've had issues with this before. I can then click on my grid pane and I can change the alignment, say top center. That is where on the screen it aligns. Um, Additionally, I can go to the layout. I can add things like H gap. Remember that the H gap is dead space between the two. So notice I added dead space just to make it look more appealing. Believe it's where do I change? Forgive me, I did this in practice and I forgot where the rows and column numbers are. Oh, there we go. Grid pane, so I can just click and I can do grid pane add row before. So now notice I added row before the button. I can do grid pane add row above or below. This will go below the button. Well, it was below the one I currently had selected. And there you go. Now I should note that this scene builder built in here actually is kind of finicky and that doesn't work super great. It's a good starting point. This scene builder is actually a separate application. And so you can just go to Google and search FXML scene builder. And this will be, so there's a number of different choices here. The Oracle one, I think, generally works pretty well. And I would recommend using a standalone. All you're generating here, though, is the FXML. And so the FXML code underpinning everything here is being updated as I add code. So notice I've added in, when I added in my V gap, it was added into the code here. When I added in my H gap, it was also added over here. So the scene selector is kind of just, or the scene builder, excuse me, is a GUI that modifies this code. So if I were to do a new scene, and I'm just going to call this one demo, I'm going to go to the scene builder. I'm going to delete the anchor pane. And I'm going to instead add, just in this case, a grid pane. And from here, I'm going to delete the first row, and I'm going to delete, it'll let me click on it. This is where the grid pane can be a bit problematic. Not the grid pane, excuse me, but the scene selector built in to Java. So for sake of time, I'm just going to use a flow pane, and I apologize for the delays there. From there, again, use the standalone application. It will produce the same FXML file. So that's what I would recommend. I just don't want to have too many things up on the window when I want to be switching back and forth later in this lecture for various reasons. So here we have different containers. Just be aware that each of these different panes are a different style. For instance, you can do tabbed panes, where you can have your application split up on multiple tabs, and the tabs kind of each act as their own little scene that you put different buttons in, etc. The controls are your widgets. So things like adding in, say, a label, and then from there we can click on our label and we can set various properties like the text. This is a label. And I'll expand that out a bit just so you can see it. When I click away, you'll see it's been updated. I can then do things like change the font size, say 24, if I want that text to be bigger. You have a lot of options to work with here. This properties has to deal with display. Now, in addition to properties, there's also layout, which for now we're just not really going to worry about. There's also this thing called code. This window code over here is going to be extremely important in just a second. So remember that it's here. But for now, I can just add in the text I want, etc. Now let's add a button. And I'm going to add this button to the pane. I'm really having a lot of trouble with this, aren't I? I swear when I did this twice this morning, and I've never not been able to click the button before. Unsure why this is happening. Okay, there we go. I added the button after the label. I'm not sure why this was happening. Again, apologies. I did not have these issues earlier today. From there, again, use the standalone application. From there, I can have my button. I can change the text, for example, press this button. So this is good. You can see how to build a UI. Again, the standalone application is going to look just like this. But now we actually can't immediately run this app. We still need to create our application that runs it, but we also need to create something else called a controller. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new class, and this is going to be just in-class demo app. And this class is going to extends application from JavaFX. And I actually already have the code here on another window, so I'm just going to copy it in and then work through it with you. Same as before, we're going to have our main method that just calls launch, and then we're going to have a start method. Now from here, I want to draw your attention to this line of code. On this line of code, notice that we are doing something, and this is a pretty long line of code. I don't expect you to memorize this, but we're doing something called fxml loader, and we're loading, and this get class method is going to just get the current window. So we're loading into this class. We're going into it, getting the resource, demo, capital D demo.fxml. Oh, look, that matches this file name. The idea is we're going to load this file. But even still, we're not done yet. We still can't run this application. We need to go one step further, and we need to create a class to serve as a controller. And that class name needs to match this file, or you can change inside of text what the controller is. Where did I apologize. I'm having nothing but issues with this. I'm just going to load in something here real quick. Sorry about that. All right, we're good. We're good. I fixed it. So from there, inside of this demo fxml, I need to add into my flow pane, which is my root pane, I need to add into it fx:controller. And you can't really do this with the UI. You're going to have to do this by hand. fx:controller. And I'm going to specify that my controller is demo, this class. Now, I could change my controller to any other class I want, But the idea of the controller is the thing that gives me access to the UI elements at a code level. And here's why this is useful. So I now have a demo, and for now I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to show you that this runs first. And, need to set up my configurations. Let's create a new run configuration application. We're going to call this one demo. The main class is going to be in-class demo app. We're going to use the same VM options, except I'm going to add one. And the one I'm adding is JavaFX.fxml. So just to be clear, I added this one. Going to apply. I'm then going to run demo. And hang on. Did I spell it wrong? Sorry. I did spell it wrong. I apologize. I'm kind of just out of sorts today. This needs to be comma first, and then that's what I did wrong. And then JavaFX.fxml. Okay? Now run the program, and hey, here's the application. So to just refresh what I did, I'm loading in the fxml file. I set my VM options the same as we did before, except I added comma JavaFXML. And the reason I have to add this is I'm now parsing an fxml file in order to set up my interface, rather than trying to manually code the interface. From here, we haven't actually done anything with this demo class, but this class does need to exist. And it's FX controller, and this is going to be in whatever your anchor pane, that is your starting pane is for your interface. Any questions so far? Sorry, I more just need a pause for a drink of water. All right. So from here, now this is where, let's go back to our scene builder. I want to point out this code section, specifically fx:ID. This ID effectively serves as a variable name. And so I can give my button a variable name here under the code dropdown under fxid. I don't have to do it in the UI, but you're welcome to do so. You can also notice here's the same button. I can also add in fx:ID equals, and then I give the variable name. Let's call this for now button. Actually, let's just call it my button. I'm going to do the same for the text field. fxid equals my text. And like I said, you can modify all these same properties at the XML level. It's just, if you're more visual, you may find it more useful to do it this way. From here, now that we have these fields, we're going to go to our demo class. And in our demo class, we're going to use a new tag, at fxml. And specifically, I'm going to make these IDs that I just added into variables. So, label my, and actually let me import that, my text at fxml button, my button. And now I have actually defined the buttons that I am going to be using. The button and the label that are in my UI. And this is going to allow me to do action listeners in here. Because this button is actually going to be this button in my UI. So from there, I'm going to create an action listener, public void, because all action event methods are void. And I'm going to call this handle button. And this takes in action event E. So this is similar to any action handler method you would create. We don't need the whole class. We only need the handler. Okay. Import that. And then all I'm going to do is say my text dot set text is going to change the text to say you've pressed the button. Not super exciting, but just to show that something's happening when we're pressing the button. And then from there, I need to do one other thing. Let's go back to my demo, and specifically, I need to add to my button on action equals, and then this method is going to be, actually, sorry, this method should be protected, not private. Although you can make it public, but it needs to at least be protected. It can't be private. But the name of the method is handle button, so I'm going to do pound handle button. Something I forgot to do, you also, because this method is going to be accessed from the fxml file, you need to do fxml here. So I've now just defined an action listener, handle button, and I have attached that action listener to my button object. Now, notice, by the way, this is the file I'm running in class demo. I haven't modified this. This is just handling the startup. So now I'm going to run my demo, and you will notice that when I press the button, the screen changes. Specifically, it says I press the button. It's calling that action listener. Now, to be clear, this needs to be fxid some name to give me that variable name and fx my button. If I go into my controller called demo, and this we would call this controller class, these variable names have to match up exactly. The on action function name handle button has to match up exactly, only you put a pound sign in front of it. You can do all this from the scene builder. Notice under, if when I click on the button, fx my button, or when I click on the label, fx my text. Additionally, when I click on the button, you'll see on action handle button. So you can add these things in at the level of the scene builder, that the UI, but you should be comfortable with what they look like at a text level. That is to say that without much complexity, without really any more complexity than I'm showing here, this is what you could expect to see on the exam, as well as fields like text area, etc. Are there any questions so far about this? Should we try to work on homework 5 before the exam? So you need to have a group. I would try to have a group before the exam, and I would get started. And the reason is the exam is a week from today, so that's March 31. If you don't start on homework 5 before then, effectively you're going to lose a week of work. Plus, with GUIs, just getting some degree of practice with it will help you on the exam, because there will be GUI components on the exam. Any other questions? Do we officially have our group? So where? You don't need to list it. You don't need to contact me to ask permission. You don't need to list it anywhere. You just need everyone individually will still submit their GitHub link. And then one of you needs to add the TA, which again that'll be done later. But also, if you have a group of 3, all 3 of you will submit on Colab the same GitHub link, as well as the names of who's in your group, and that will be updated in the document. I just wanted to get the homework in front of you, just so you could start thinking of it today. But you don't need to officially list your group. That said, you should know who is in your group as soon as possible. If you need help finding a group, let me know. And I will just, if people email me saying I don't have a group, admittedly, I will pair people at random, but that's to make sure you have a group. Additionally, groups are size 2 or 3. There are no individuals working alone, and there are no, doesn't matter which TA gets graded, like if we have different TAs. So I will make sure everyone in the group has the same TA. That's what I will do. I'll probably later on have a form for you to fill out, but immediately right now, you just need to have a group and start putting the GitHub together. But there will be no groups of 4 under any circumstance. Also, just to stipulate this ahead of time, everyone in the group will get the same score. If you end up in a group where someone does absolutely no work, that will show in their commit history, and we can address that in that context. Certainly don't be afraid to reach out to us if there's a problem, and I will remove someone from your group. But you have to have a group of 2 or 3. Be very careful about kind of who you jump into this project with. Any other questions? So hypothetically, you might do something like go into the scene builder. And, I don't know, let's just call this hypothetically tic-tac-toe or something. And then you might do something like, I don't know, maybe add just a general pane, or excuse me, a grid pane. And, whoops. I've actually moved it too much. Maybe do something like a grid pane down here, and make the grid pane say 5 by 5, which you could do by just down here in text. Go to the grid pane, and you could add rows that way, or you could do it this way as well. Add column before, add column before, add column before, add row above, something like that. And look, I have a 5 by 5 pane. Now what I might do is find the buttons. Sorry, scroll past them. Buttons, and drop each button into each pane of the grid. Something like that. You can kind of work on it on your own. You can see how the buttons are added here. You get the idea. Again, I would recommend downloading the third-party scene builder and using that, but I recommend using C Builder. What specifically about JavaFX should we know for the exam? You should be familiar. So all the code I've uploaded, everything that's in that code, I would say is simple enough for the exam. So things like certainly action event handlers. So event handlers are 100% going to be on the exam. You should be familiar with buttons and text. You should be at base level familiar with so for example, if you look at my demo here, you don't need to worry about everything here, just things like the FX ID, the text. You should be familiar with the FX ID. You should be familiar with on action. You should be familiar with text areas, etc. Really better than just writing a double for a loop in Java? No, not necessarily. You're welcome to do that as well. I was just giving an example of like that's how you could get started. I didn't want to tell you that's what to do. Um, what I would say is that you might find it easier to do the grid layout to create, because you can create the grid pane the same way that I have this field. You can also give your pane an ID, FX ID, and then equals my pane. And then from there, you could do myPane.add. And similar to how I add to the grid pane here in Seed Changer, you could do mygrid.add something like this. And you could do a for loop, a double for loop that way. That's how I'd recommend doing it. Just the reason is you're still going to want something that looks kind of aesthetically pleasing. Uh, and just doing it manually with a flow pane, I would very much recommend against. But those are just different options. Um, but yeah, so if I go back to the code that I've posted uh, previously under resources, um, everything that's demonstrated here you should be familiar with. So everything that's demonstrated in each of these files, and the same is true with my lecture notes for today, such as they relate to that fxml file. Again, not expecting you to write an fxml from scratch, but I may give you an fxml and say something like, write a method that, write an action event method that changes this field to do blank, something like that. Any other questions? All right, I apologize for being disorganized today. It's been I'm admittedly worried I'm sick now. So it's been a rough couple of days. Um, if you have questions about this, because I know I kind of stumbled through it a bit, please don't be afraid to ask. To that end, I'm going to create a Piazza thread right now for questions for the exam that you want me to go over, and I will happily do that. I will also list in that same topic a list of topics on the exam. So give me like an hour or so to get that written. And then from there, we'll do our exam review on Thursday. Because this is an online format, I will prepare some material to go through based on the questions I get on Piazza. And then I'll open the floor for general questions. Pardon me. Um, with that, if there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day, and I'll wrap up lecture, but I'll stick around here for like 5 minutes for questions. Pardon me. Give me one sec, because there's a lot of seems good in chat today. I see. I'm actually just looking for something here. Um, can't seem to find what I'm looking for. I'll look at it later. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and go if you're done. If you don't have any questions, and that'll be it. But I'll otherwise stick around for another bit and let people type questions in if they have them. I don't know why my viewers have gone up since I've said, all right, we're done, you can go. That's amusing to me somewhat. But certainly I'm right now I'm just taking questions. Is Colby still there? He is. Here, let me get the bear. Okay, look how adorable he is being. He's still asleep. Look at this cat. He's still chilling. I'm sorry, Bear. I didn't mean to wake you up. I accidentally woke him up. Now I feel bad. Now I feel bad. Any other questions? Yeah, he's a great cat. He's very vocal though. At some point there'll be a lecture where he just is meowing constantly. I feel bad that I woke him up though. All right, well I'm gonna end the stream here. I have office hours later today in the Discord, starting at 2. So I'm gonna take a half-hour break real quick. If you have questions, don't be afraid to hop into my office hours. I will see everyone later. Take care.